With the introduction of Pro Play on NBA 2K24, Paul George's animations have become more realistic and smoother than ever. And with that being said, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be taking a look at this playoff Paul George build on NBA 2K24, and we are going to be using all of Paul George's animations today in this video so you guys can see how smooth of a scorer this guy is. But now let's actually start making this build, and for the position, we're going to be going with the small forward position. Height's going to be 6'8", weight 220 pounds with a 6'9" wingspan. Now, starting things off in the finishing, we're going to have an 80 driving layup, which is going to get you Pro Touch on Hall of Fame, and the Jimmy Butler layup style, which is my personal favorite. I'm not entirely sure if Paul George has his own layup style, but I'm going to be honest with you guys, most layup styles aren't unique and don't really differentiate from one another when it comes to most of the moves that you will do with them. So I don't think it was worth going any higher on the driving layup. I think 80 is perfectly fine because, again, Paul George is a player that can do pretty much everything at an elite level, so we couldn't really invest too much into one thing over the other. Now, moving on to the driving dunk, we're going to go up to an 84, which does get you the LeBron James dunk package, which is fantastic, especially considering the rating you can unlock it at. Then for the post control, we're going to have a 75, which gets you post fade feet on gold, which is nice to have on this build. Now, getting to these finishing highlights, you're going to be really good in transition with that 84 driving dunk, and then look at this right here, pump fake, speed boost right past them into the spin dunk over multiple defenders. That's with an 84 driving dunk once again right here. Drive right past my guy, go up with that floater. Again, the meter is huge on those. Meter is going to be huge on all open layups. So I'm going to be honest with you guys, I feel like everybody should be playing this game with layup timing on. And usually the one comment that I will hear when I recommend for people to use it with their layup timing on is people will be like, oh, but what if I mistime an open layup? Dog, if you can see the green window on an open layup, you just got to understand that if you mistime an open layup with your meter timing on, you have to be really bad at timing layups. Now, if you saw in that last layup, I timed that one pretty poorly and it still went in. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I did try to acrobat out of that one, which is why I mistimed it so poorly, but again, you don't need to time it perfectly if you're taking open layups. Now, moving on to the shooting, we're going to have an 86 mid-range shot, which gets you open looks on gold, which is very nice in this year's game. And then we're also going to have an 87 three-point shot, which gets you space creator on gold, and it also gets you access to the Tracy McGrady jump shot base, which if you want to use on this build, you absolutely can. However, like I mentioned earlier on in this video, we were not using any meta animations, and we used every single Paul George animation that was in the game, which includes his jump shot. And now moving on to the shooting highlights, and once again, during this section of the video, we're using all of Paul George's animations, his dribble pull-up, his hop jumper, his jump shot. And I'm not gonna lie, a lot of these animations are pretty decent. Now, right there, that's the pro spin jumper, but on Paul George's player in the regular game, he does have pro spin jumper, and look at that ankle breaker off the PG step back. That was clean, and that was also the thumbnail of today's video. Now, one thing that I do wish that was added to this year's game was some sort of snatch back for Paul George, or some sort of like moving step back dribble animation for Paul George, because in the regular game he uses Luka Doncic, and I ended up using Zach LaVine moving step back on this player because I think it was the closest thing. But I'm going to be honest with you guys, there's nothing that perfectly replicates the actual Paul George like snatch back that he does in regular games. You can kind of get some of those snatchbacks out of the hop jumper animations that he does, but it's really hard to chain that move into anything else because when you cancel a hop jumper, it takes really long to get to that next move. And then when it comes to the other way that you can get it, you can kind of get it with his aggressive breakdown. Like, look at this right here. It kind of has the snatchback animation built into it, but I just kind of switched out of it and went to the Zach LaVine one. But that's another example where you kind of can get his snatchback, but you got to let that whole animation play out just to get to the snatchback at the end. I just wish it was an actual move in the game that we could just combo in and out of fluently with all of his other animations. Hopefully next year's game they will. They probably will because Paul George, again, is a very popular player, especially when it comes to his dribbling capabilities. But here's the full pro play sequence right here with the Paul George aggressive breakdown combo into his snatchback hop jumper. And that's the closest you're going to get to getting some real Paul George animations in this game and actually doing some stuff that he does in game while also doing it on 2K. Yeah, no, notes for the future when it comes to 2K. I hope they add some sort of snatchback or moving step back animation for Paul George, then maybe a crossover as well, because his crossover is very filthy and he's very good at moving laterally left to right with that crossover. Now getting back to actually talking about the build, because I feel like I've just been on a straight up yap session about the animations. Getting back to actual Paul George stuff right here. Look at this, man. You're going to be dominant in the mid-range area, and that Paul George dribble pull-up is smooth. It's only really good to the dominant hand, so when you're on this build, you can only really fade to the right, but that's okay because the hop jumper is only really good when you go to your non-dominant hand. So as long as you know that, as long as you know, hey, when you go left, you should do the hop jumper. When you go right, you should do the dribble pull-up. You're going to be perfectly fine if you want to use all of Paul George's animations. Now we have just a couple more shooting highlights to get out of the way, and then now let me actually talk about the build a little bit here. Again, this build is a jack of all trades type of build. You're going to be able to do a little bit of everything. Drive to the rim, score in the mid-range, score out at the three-point line, play defense, shot block, get rebounds. Like, you're going to, again, be able to do all of those things on this build and do it at a pretty good rate as well. And that's just how Paul George is. He is just really good at a lot of things when it comes to basketball, and that's just how we had to translate his build into 2K as well. But now let's get to this final shooting highlight right here. Got sharpshooting takeover, catch, fire, and that is going to go in without an issue. And again, let's talk about the jump shot. Again, we were using base Paul George, release 1 Paul George, release 2 Paul George, maximum release speed. I saw in the comments there were a lot of people saying that they don't like when I use NBA player specific builds and I do not use their animations. I hear that, and I am listening to you guys, and I'm going to try to use as many NBA player animations as possible when I do make these builds from here on out. I also watched a boatload of Paul George highlights before I started making this video, and again, that's the type of effort that I'm trying to put in with these NBA player videos. And if you like that type of content, make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like that in the future. But now moving on to the playmaking really quickly. 75 pass accuracy, 85 ball handle, 75 speed with ball. This is all standard stuff for a 6'8 build, and we're not going to really spend a whole lot of time talking about it. Playmaking wise on this build, you are going to be perfectly fine right here. Make the pass. Passes are going to be perfectly fine on this build. 75 pass accuracy is great in all casual modes, even if you are playing 5v5. You really don't need high pass accuracy in this game unless if you are playing as a center or a point guard. Point guard because you have to make those reads and be able to dot rotations before the rotation can actually get there. And then secondly, having high pass accuracy on a center is really good for fast breaks. Being able to get the ball out to people leaking on the break with like gold or Hall of Fame break starter is really nice in this year's game. Now again, for all the playmaking animations, I was using everything that I can find that was Paul George related, except for the signature size up. I don't know if that's hidden behind the starter 3 rep level. Again, if you guys don't know, I reset my rep level and switched to rise, but I had to use James Harden's signature size up, which again was perfectly fine. It was kind of similar to Paul George, but once again, I just couldn't find Paul George for the life of me. I checked everywhere, so maybe it's starter 3, maybe it just hasn't come out yet, but again, man, I couldn't use that, but I used every other Paul George animation that I could use. Now again, moving on to the defense, we're going to have an 82 perimeter defense for challenger on silver, an 81 steal for interceptor on silver, a 68 block to get chase down artist on bronze, and then a 60 defensive rebound to get rebound chaser on bronze. But if you don't really care for rebounding on this build, you could drop that as low as you want, and then I believe you could correct the perimeter defense all the way up to an 87. So if you want to make that change, you can, but if you want to make a more well-rounded Paul George build that can rebound as well, this is the way you got to make it. Now again, just a couple quick defensive highlights right here. A little closeout on a jump shooter, got a really good contest there, and then right here, go for a blitz steal, and we get it right there with sharp take with heat check. We try to shoot the step back, and yeah, that wasn't in the shooting highlights for a reason. But now here is the build fully maxed out. Just a couple things we need to talk about. 81 speed for the speed booster silver, 73 acceleration for the blow by on silver, 74 strength to get bulldozer bronze, physical handles gold, and then a 65 vertical because why not, and then a 97 stamina. Now the only real weakness of this build that I just could not get on this build was interior defense, but again, as long as you're not going up against like a post scorer where you need post move lockdown, you're going to be perfectly fine with just 50 interior and a 68 block. You're going to get a lot of chase down blocks as well. And now coming out of the My Player builder, you are going to get the shades of Bruce Bowen, Brandon Miller, and Paul George. I think it's really funny we got both Brandon Miller and Paul George on the same build, and you're going to get the build name 3-level threat. Now you're going to see that in my intro of this video, I was on a 2-way 3-level threat, and that is because I made the version with 87 prim and no rebounding whatsoever. But when I was playing on the build, I only had 82 perimeter defense anyway, so all the gameplay, it's going to be very similar. But that's going to be it for today's video. I'm out, man. Peace.